Hello there, good day to you, good evening to you. I hope you've had a very nice day. I've had a very boring day today in the hospital I'm in, and yeah, now I'm going to make quite a boring video, which you might not even want to watch, but you know, you just, you could do. It's all about artificial intelligence, and I guess I'm being a bit formulaic with the old juxtapositions recently. So looking at things that sort of contradict each other theologically or kind of thematically, or in some way socially pose different arguments or kind of like contentious social issues, in a desperate attempt at shameless self-promotion and virtue signaling, basically through some sort of vicarious intellectual and verbose circumloquacious diatribe that nobody looks at, and I just kind of watch myself the next day when it has 8 views, and nobody really pays attention or cares about anything. Don't really have any family left. I've got my brother, I speak to him once a day, and don't really have very many mates either. So that's shit. Have still got this Alan Sugar autobiography though, so hopefully some of my business ideas will take flight, and stuff will work out well with those. I kind of don't really like this camera angle, and because I'm in the PQ ward, I'm not allowed my like influencer light thing, so it's like I put the fucking halogen lights on. Might help. Can you do that as well? Right, there you go. Not 1% better. Change the camera angle. Put it to just factor in the corner of the room. It is mirrored for some reason, but I'm not going to be in most of the video, so no one cares about that. Anyway, this is taking ages, isn't it? Sorry about that. I'll read the shit AI article. You can be done with my fucking vapid, egomaniac, megalomaniacal ranting. So here's a research paper. I haven't read it yet. I just make these videos because I'm so bored and it gives me like a creative outlet. And you know, one day someone might look at them and think, oh, that's interesting. That's quite a good thought I didn't have before. Let's have a look. So, the productivity paradox, artificial intelligence, labour extortion, and the illusion of leisure. The dual prophecies of the algorithmic age. Artificial intelligence has seamlessly transitioned from a speculative frontier of computer science into the foundational infrastructure of modern global society. Its integration into the socio-economic fabric is no longer localised, experimental phenomenon, but a ubiquitous paradigm shift dictating the future of capital allocation, corporate governance, and the fundamental value of human labour. As algorithms increasingly arbitrate the complexities of daily life, from the curation of information to the execution of complex logistical networks, reliance upon their development has become the definitive metric for future social engineering, societal engineering. Within this sweeping transformation, a paradox and deeply a profound and deeply unsettling paradox has emerged regarding the future of human employment, representing two juxtaposed expectations that currently dominate contemporary economic and philosophical discourse. So, on one end of this theological spectrum lies the looming spectre of mass technological unemployment. This theory posits that an artificial intelligence and advanced robotics achieve parity with and eventually surpass human cognitive and physical capabilities. So massive economic disenfranchisement will eventually follow. In this scenario, capital owners and corporate boards will ruthlessly leverage automation to replace human workers en masse across both blue-collar and white-collar sectors by severing the traditional historical link between human labour and economic survival. This trajectory threatens to plunge vast swathes of the global population into systemic poverty, concentrating unprecedented wealth and power into the hands of a few entities that control the underlying algorithmic infrastructure. Conversely, an equally compelling and arguably more insidious theory suggests that a future defined not by the obsolescence of the human worker but by their hyper-exploitation. This perspective argues that while the artificial intelligence will undoubtedly make discrete tasks dramatically easier and faster to execute, the dividends of this efficiency will not be returned to the worker in the form of an increased leisure or reduced hours. But therefore, rather than being made redundant or jobless, employees will simply be expected to be exponentially more productive. Their workloads will organically intensify and their performance targets will be relentlessly raised by an administrative apparatus that is biologically incapable of satisfaction. So ultimately, this means that the quantity and target-based productivity of nearly all industries will be artificially set higher, calibrated not to the natural cadence of human ability, but to the frictionless processing speed of artificial intelligence. In this scenario, the human worker is not replaced, rather they're forcibly synchronized with the relentless, unyielding machinery of algorithmic capitalism, resulting in the effective extortion of their labour. So navigating this dichotomy requires a nuanced, introspective examination of current macroeconomic labour trends, shifting dynamics of workplace psychology, the fragmented state of emerging legislative frameworks, and the profound existential warnings issued by the very architect who breathed life into these digital systems. The Godfather's warning: intelligence, liberty, and the existential peril. So to truly comprehend the stakes of this technological revolution and its downstream effects on the global workforce, one must first examine the stark warnings issued by Professor Geoffrey Hinton, a British-Canadian computer scientist universally recognised as the godfather of AI. Hinton laid the foundational mathematical frameworks for deep learning and artificial neural networks. His pioneering work on backpropagation and Boltzmann machines served as the bedrock upon which the current generative AI boom was built. For these monumental contributions, Hinton was awarded 2024 Nobel Prize in Physics, an honour he shared with John Hopfield, followed swiftly by the prestigious 2025 Queen Elizabeth Prize for Engineering, where he was honoured alongside figures like NVIDIA CEO. Sorry, just a guy knocks on the door to do the observations then. So while he was honoured alongside figures such as NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang and Meta's Jan LeCun, yet rather than utilising these globally visible platforms solely for the celebration of human ingenuity, Hinton has utilised his commendations to deliver stark, controversial, and deeply surreptitious warnings about the intrinsic perils of the technology he helped birth. So upon accepting his recent accolades, Hinton actively shortened the odds of artificial intelligence triggering a catastrophic outcome for humanity. So during interviews surrounding his Nobel Queen Elizabeth Prize commendations, he stated unequivocally that he now estimates that 10 to 20% probability that artificial intelligence will lead to human extinction within the next 3 decades. That's quite fucked up, isn't it? Really, like that's a much higher percentage than I want to see. He emphasised that the pace of technological acceleration is moving much faster than he or his peers had previously anticipated. Hinton's warnings are not the panicked cries of a technological Luddite, but these calculated, deeply concerned assessments of a visionary who understands the architecture of the system better than anyone else on Earth. In a highly publicised move, Hinton departed from his prestigious role as a Vice President and Engineering Fellow at Google in 2023, specifically to distance himself from corporate gag orders and speak freely about the dangers. So he's openly expressed that a part of him regrets his life's work. It's like an Oppenheimer kind of thing. Like, he's noting an unprecedented historical paradigm Humanity's never had to navigate such existence alongside an entity objectively more intelligent than itself. Employing a chilling analogy during an interview on BBC Radio 4's Today programme, Hinton remarked that when comparing the future unchecked intellect of AI to human cognition, humans will be akin to 3-year-olds attempting to control a vastly superior, incomprehensible force. He pointedly asked, how many examples do you know of a more intelligent thing being controlled by a less intelligent thing? Beyond the absolute apocalyptic extreme of biological human extinction, Hinton's warnings heavily underscore the immediate creeping threats of human liberty and security. The deployment of advanced AI systems by corporate entities inherently involves taking catastrophic societal level risks on behalf of the global populace, almost always without democratic consent, adequate oversight, or public discourse. So, as outlined in written evidence submitted to the UK Parliament's Joint Select Committee on Human Rights by researchers Andrea Moiti and Stephen Older, experts are heavily leaning on Article 3 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. This guarantees the fundamental right to life, liberty, and security of a person. To argue that unchecked AI development represents an existential threat to these inalienable freedoms. The threat to liberty is not merely a physical, it's deeply economic and structural. Hinton has directly addressed these socio-economic ramifications of this technological leap, explicitly warning that within the current unregulated capitalist framework, artificial intelligence will be weaponised by the wealthy to replace workers, generating massive unemployment and a disproportionate concentration of corporate profits. In his estimation, the neural networks themselves are not inherently malicious, but their deployment within an economic system obsessed with exponential growth guarantees the technology will make a few people much richer and most people poorer. This profound assertion directly bridges the gap between the existential philosophical threat of uncontrollable superintelligence and the immediate grinding economic reality of the modern workforce facing the dual threats of obsolescence and extortion. So here's scenario A, right? The spectre of mass technological unemployment. So the fear that artificial intelligence will precipitate mass technological unemployment is not a fringe anxiety. It's heavily grounded in robust macroeconomic modelling, historical precedents of industrial shifts, and recent highly visible corporate restructuring efforts. But proponents of this scenario argue that AI models become capable of it autonomously executing complex cognitive tasks, ranging from sophisticated computer programming and intricate legal analysis to high-level administrative coordination. Human capital will become an unjustifiable, inefficient expense on the corporate ledger. What you get with that is what they've quite enlighteningly termed macroeconomic projections, coupled with occupational exposure. So macroeconomic analysis from the world's leading financial institutions that suggest that a highly significant portion of the global workforce is exposed to AI-driven automation. According to comprehensive projections published by Goldman Sachs Research, the widespread adoption of generative AI could eventually expose approximately 300 million full-time jobs to varying degrees of automation globally. Within the United States, their economists estimate that this could displace 6 to 7%, it's a small number, of the entire workforce. However, traditional financial institutions often categorise this displacement through a lens of market optimism, predicting that the unemployment rate might only temporarily increase by 0.5%, a percentage point during a transitionary phase. So, operating under the assumption that new, currently unimaginable job categories will organically emerge to absorb the displaced labour force within a few years. It's quite an interesting way to look at it. So more granular academic frameworks, such as those developed by researchers at the Wharton School of University, that's a bit of a weird name, isn't it? The Wharton School of University of Pennsylvania, utilising Darren Acemoglu's task-based economic framework, offer a starker and more detailed assessment. By defining a job as exposed, if at least 50% of its daily activities can be fully or partly automated by generative AI. Tools researchers estimate that approximately 42% of all current occupations face substantial exposure to this technological wave. The following table synthesizes the varying degrees of AI exposure across different occupational categories, highlighting a fundamental shift in the nature of technological displacement. Unlike the mechanical automation of the 20th century, which primarily targeted blue-collar physical labour, the AI revolution is uniquely positioned to hollow out the white-collar knowledge-based economy. So I'm going to read these, right? I'm going to read these. So you've got one column which is broad occupational category. The next column is entitled primary tasks highly susceptible to generative AI. Then you've got one entitled estimated economic exposure level, and another one that says relative risk of complete displacement. And then you've got industry sectors, so broad occupational category. So for computer and mathematical scientists, their primary tasks and highly susceptible to generative AI are presented or predicted to be code generation, debugging, algorithmic optimization, data sorting, basic software architecture. Estimated economic exposure level, very high. Risk of relative complete displacement, severe. So if you are working computer and mathematical sciences, AI is probably going to try and fuck you in the ass without any lube. Computer and mathematical sciences, code generation, debugging, algorithmic optimization, data storing, basic software architecture, exponential estimated economic exposure level is high, so not as bad as the other one, but still severe in terms of risk of complete displacement. So legal stuff, lawyers go buy ice cream vans, or florists, or I don't know, do something else. Business and financial operations, again, primary tasks highly susceptible to generative AI, market trend analysis, compliance auditing, basic accounting, and of course automated report generation are going to affect business and financial operations with an estimated economic exposure level that's very high, and fortunately only a moderate to severe relative risk of complete displacement. You've got healthcare practitioners and technical, so primary tasks highly susceptible to generative AI. In healthcare, they're looking at diagnostic data assistance, patient scheduling, medical record synthesis, literature review, moderately estimated to be exposed to unemployment, and relative risk of complete displacement quite low because it requires strict human oversight liability. That's a thing, so you know what that fucking says. I don't use Threads. Like, I do use Threads, but it's just weird and no one uses it. It's like fucking green peppers. Like, who invented green peppers? Like, making a fucking salad. Like, red peppers, delicious. Red onion, bit of balsamic glaze, yellow peppers, lovely. Green peppers, minging, sour, bitter, like watery. Threads is a green pepper to me. Construction and physical extraction. So primary tasks and highly susceptible to generative AI look at complex physical labour, manual machine operation, real-time spatial problem solving in unpredictable environments. So that's very low in its exposure, and actually fortunately very minimal in its risk of complete displacement. This data indicates that mid-level jobs, roles that require a few years of professional experience but still report to senior staff, are projected to face the most severe decreases in demand. The baseline reality is that if an AI can write functional code, draft a legally binding contract, or balance a corporate ledger with a zero marginal cost, the economic justification for paying a human middle-class salary complete with healthcare and retirement, that's the nurse asking me to take my meds. So this data indicates that mid-level jobs, roles that require a few years of professional experience but still report to senior staff, are projected to face the most severe decreases in demand. So the baseline reality is that if an AI can write functional code, draft a legally binding contract, or balance a corporate ledger with near zero marginal cost of the economic justification for paying a human middle class salary, complete with healthcare and retirement benefits, completely evaporates. So then it goes on to another section titled Empirical Evidence of Corporate Displacement. So this is already happening. These academic and financial projections are no longer entirely theoretical. Corporate restructuring, I wonder if you can hear me. I've been putting my mic, it's balanced on like an eye mask, and I've just realised that that's probably really shit audio. If you haven't been able to hear for the whole video, then I'm sorry. I've got this eye mask which I don't really wear very often to help me sleep, and I've completely forgotten where I was up to. So corporate restructuring trends extending to 25 and 26 have provided stark empirical evidence of AI serving as the primary catalyst for mass layoffs. Amazon, for example, initiated one of its most severe and strategic workforce reductions, announcing plans to cut up to 30,000 corporate jobs, representing nearly 10% of its entire global corporate workforce. This was not a reduction of warehouse staff or delivery drivers, but a targeted exclusion of the white-collar workforce, heavily impacting human resources, specifically the people, experience and technology division. So I'm taking this medicine called clonazepam, which makes my voice really slurry and sedates me quite a lot, so you'll have to bear with me. Operations and even the Amazon Web Service, which ironically remains the company's most profitable division. Industry analysts explicitly and publicly linked these massive layoffs to the company's growing reliance on AI-driven productivity. By utilising artificial intelligence tools to automate repetitive corporate tasks, streamline complex workflows, and eliminate what CEO Andy Jassy termed unnecessary bureaucracy, Amazon's corporate leadership realised through internal efficiency to render tens of thousands of roles entirely redundant. So the analyst film eMarketer noted that Amazon appeared to be realising enough efficiency through automation to support a major reduction in its white-collar workforce. This massive restructuring perfectly illustrates the capitalist imperative at the heart of technological unemployment. When artificial intelligence lowers the cost of production by achieving human-level output in a fraction of the time, corporations will naturally and ruthlessly excise the human element to maximise their profit margins. Furthermore, comprehensive assessment of AI capabilities published by the UK government notes that autonomous AI agents are advancing at a breakneck pace. The length and complexity of tasks that these agents can perform autonomously has been observed to double approximately every 7 months in specialised domains such as coding, cybersecurity, and deep research. When frontier models were rigorously evaluated on over 1,300 tasks drawn from the actual work products of experienced professionals, the AI produced deliverables rated good as or better than human expert output in nearly half of all cases. So they just like squeezing out a fat one on our chests, you know. Crucially, the tasks evaluated typically required an average of 7 hours for human experts to complete. If a corporate entity can achieve 7 hours of high-level intellectual labour in the same matter of seconds at a fraction of a cent of a compute cost, the economic incentive to retain a human worker is entirely nullified, lending immense credibility to the technological unemployment hypothesis. Scenario B, this is the other side of the coin of my little juxtaposition to get me an extra 2 views on YouTube. Right, algorithmic management and the extortion of productivity. So while the threat of absolute job displacement is palpable and structurally underway in specific sectors, an alternative and deeply insidious reality is simultaneously taking root across the vast majority of global industries. Rather than replacing the workforce entirely, corporations are leveraging the capabilities of artificial intelligence to fundamentally alter the nature of work itself, initiating an era of profound workload intensification relentless surveillance and algorithmic extortion. They say it's an illusion of leisure and the shifting baseline. I quite like a bit of baseline, but that's not what they're all talking about. And I don't mean amphetamines, you fucking miserable fuckers. The promise of automation, right, dating back to the dawn of the Industrial Revolution, has historically been tethered to the utopian promise of leisure. So the prevailing social theory has always suggested that as machines take over mundane, repetitive, or like computationally heavy tasks, human workers will be liberated. They'll be free to focus on creative, strategic, and meaningful endeavours. Only, like, I mean, yes, ostensibly with a human basic income, or like UC or something, all while working few hours and enjoying a high quality of life. I guess the whole economy could just be more efficient if we did live in a utopian society. I think I should just buy the Bank of International Settlements and just write off the 288 trillion of digital debt that enslaves the whole world, and we could all work 1 day a week. Drop me an email about that if you've got any ideas of how to make that possible. If you've got like a team of solicitors with close protection, property somewhere, Trasco do great armoured cars, bomb-proof, like grenade-proof, bulletproof windows. Yeah, I'd quite like to go down to Switzerland to get the Bank of International Settlements and tell them to stop being so fucking predatory. The promise of automation, dating back, I've read this bit already, have I? Dating back to the dawn of the Industrial Revolution, has historically been tethered to the utopian promise of leisure. Prevailing social theory has always suggested that as machines take over, yep, I have read this bit. Now this video is mundane and repetitive, which is, a bit of an onomatopoeia or an oxymoron or fucking something like that. Human workers will be liberated. They'll be free to focus on creative, strategic, and meaningful endeavours, all while working fewer hours and enjoying a higher quality of life. However, current empirical data regarding the modern integration of AI indicates that the exact opposite is occurring. A comprehensive 8-month longitudinal study documented by the Harvard Business Review observed a US-based company as it systematically integrated generative AI into its daily workflows. The findings were a stark rebuke of the leisure hypothesis, that the implementation of artificial intelligence did not reduce the workload for employees, it vastly intensified it. Researchers observed that employees utilising AI began working much faster, assumed a significantly higher volume of tasks, and consistently expanded their efforts beyond their formal job descriptions and extended their daily working hours without often explicit verbalized demands from upper management. AI has effectively transformed the concept of doing more into a more streamlined process, but this generated a hidden cascading increase in the overall baseline workload. So this intensification led directly to severe cognitive fatigue and a highly elevated risk of systemic employee burnout. Right, so the phenomenon reveals a fundamental unyielding truth about modern corporate mechanics. The efficiency gains generated by technological innovation are rarely, if ever, returned to the worker in the form of free time. Instead, the baseline expectation for productivity is just immediately and permanently recalibrated. They look at their bottom line, they look at their productivity. It's two different stats that are interdependent and intersect on each other. And business does not make kind of humanitarian or kind of necessarily humanistic policies for itself, especially if it's run by a fucking computer. But yeah, if an employee utilising generative AI model becomes 33% more productive per hour, as estimated by recent working papers from the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis analysing self-reported and time savings, corporate management will not allow that employee to work 33% fewer hours. Instead, the administration will simply increase the employee's output targets by 33%. The worker is not made redundant, they're merely expected to achieve superhuman levels of output to justify their continued employment. So the opposite, completely a juxtaposition where, again, I'll just get a tattoo that says juxtaposition on my bell end. The tyranny of algorithmic management. So the mechanism enforcing this exponentially increased workload is not a traditional human supervisor, but a pervasive, invisible system known as algorithmic management. This refers to the autonomous, data-driven decision-making processes where staff learning algorithms and AI are deployed to dictate human resources management, complex scheduling, behavioural monitoring, and performance evaluation. So algorithmic management operates through a framework of continuous digital surveillance, granular micromanagement, and real-time behavioural tracking that far exceeds the capabilities of any human oversight. Researchers into this management style identifies like 4 primary use cases that actively degrade job quality and fundamentally alter the power dynamic between employer and employee. So the first one, algorithmic work method instruction. So AI systems dictating the exact physical or digital steps a worker must take to complete a task, removing all personal agency and problem solving from the equation. So second one is algorithmic scheduling of shifts and tasks. So AI optimizing human labor perfectly to match predicted consumer demand, scheduling workers for fractured shifts without any regard for human fatigue, commuting realities, or personal life balance. So algorithmic surveillance and evaluation, AI continuously tracking keystrokes, screen time, task completion times, and subtle behavioural metrics to evaluate, rank, and systematically discipline workers in real time. That doesn't sound very good to me, does it? I mean, I don't know if it sounds like good to you, but you know, I don't want to have what he's having. Do you get me? Right. Then you've got algorithmic coordination, which is, it says, AI acting as a decentralized, omnipresent middle manager, routing tasks instantaneously across a workforce to ensure zero downtime. Quite draconian, quite scary, quite totalitarian. A massive study conducted by Eurofund and CDFOP, I don't know if fuck these guys are, analysing data from 20,000 European organisations, confirmed that the application of algorithmic management practices severely strips workers of their job autonomy and perceived justice, negatively impacting their overall workplace well-being. So workers find themselves trapped in an impossible, psychologically damaging predicament. They are caught between the relentless algorithmic production targets set by corporate boards and the managerial insistence on the use of AI tools to meet those very targets. So, as noted by labour law lecturer studying this phenomenon, the hidden externalised cost of AI adoption fall entirely on the shoulders of the workforce. As workers were placed in an impossible situation. If you don't do this, you lose your job. If you don't follow, you lose your competitors. The extortion of the augmented worker. This hyper-competitive, algorithmically enforced environment fosters a dynamic that can best be described as the systemic extortion of workers. The integration of artificial intelligence does not just assist the human worker, it forcibly sets a new artificial pace of production. The administration of modern global business is necessitated by an absolute, almost religious obsession with exponential growth, limitless profit margins, and peak productivity. Because AI tool empowers a worker, an AI tool empowers a worker to complete a comprehensive financial report, write a functional code base, or analyse massive data sets in a fraction of the traditional time, the corporate engine demands that the worker produce exponentially more reports, more code bases, and analysis within their standard 8-hour shift. So if they can complete a day's work in 2 hours, they're just expected to complete 4 days of work before they're allowed to log off. Furthermore, they may even be asked to work even longer hours as the AI system uncovers more efficiencies and generates more administrative tasks that require human rubber stamping. That might not happen, but it could happen, couldn't it? Furthermore, it's vital to recognise that behind the polished, futuristic facade of autonomous self-learning large language models lies a vast, invisible underclass of deeply exploited human behaviour, often termed artificial intelligence. Development, training and ongoing maintenance of these pristine systems rely heavily on a sprawling global network of low-paid, overworked human data labelers and content moderators. So reports indicate that millions of gig workers, predominantly located in the global south, are routinely subjected to grueling 10-hour shifts for less than 20 quid a day. These workers meticulously label images, moderate horrific content, and fine-tune the responses of the very AI models that will subsequently be deployed to extort the productivity of the white-collar workforce in the West. This dynamic demonstrates a dark truth about the current technological trajectory. So AI does not inherently eliminate human labour, it merely obscures it, pushing the most brutal forms of exploitation deeper into a hidden supply chain while simultaneously increasing the pressure on the visible workforce. So the regulatory vacuum and legislative gridlock, the severe juxtaposition of impending mass unemployment and the current reality of hyper-exploitation begs a critical, urgent question. Where does the global security society stand on regarding sort of safety, regulation and protective legislation? As AI becomes the key metric for future social engineering, the current legal landscape is obviously characterised by deeply fragmented geopolitical approaches, intense corporate lobbying and a fundamental structural struggle of democratic institutions attempting to keep pace with exponential algorithmic evolution. The European Union, the precautionary approach. So the EU has taken the most aggressive, comprehensive legislative stance globally with the drafting and implementation of the EU AI Act, having officially entered into the force in 2024. The legislation operates on a phased timeline extending into 2027, attempting to categorise and regulate AI systems based on their potential risk to society. The following table outlines the critical milestones of the EU's AI Act implementation, demonstrating the bloc's attempt to retain the technology. Is it a big one? Not really. I just can't be asked to just read what it says. So for outright bans on AI practices deemed a clear threat to safety, livelihoods and the rights, like things like social scoring, specific biometric categorisation in the workplaces, AI literacy obligations begin for whoever that is, February. By August, rules governing general purpose AI, GPAI models became applicable. That establishment gave us notified bodies of formal penalty structures for non-compliance. Then you had August 2026, core framework became operational. So there was a full application of stringent rules for high-risk AI systems at Annex 3, requiring rigorous transparency, data governance and human oversight. Member states must establish regulatory sandboxes. August 2027, extended transition. So applications for rules for high-risk systems embedded directly into traditionally regulated physical products, hopefully, maybe, by next year. Maybe I said past tense for that one as well. It's not August 2026 yet. It should have been, I'm in the Back to the Future dude, aren't I? It's actually based on me, I reckon, Brodie McLeod, quite clairvoyant, and Back to the Future, him called Marty McFly. There's another story about a spunky tin of tuna in a can being returned to Tesco, but I'll leave that for another day. I probably should make that video though. The EU's approach seeks to proactively mitigate the risks to fundamental human rights, explicitly targeting the intersection of technology, civil liberty and workplace surveillance. However, the sluggish timeline of enforcement, with the core framework not fully operational until this summer, means that corporate entities possess a substantial multi-year window to deeply integrate AI as well as algorithmic management into the labour market before those stringent oversights can effectively curtail their practices. So by the time the laws are fully enforced, the structural shift in the workplace expectations might be have already happened and be irreversible. The United Kingdom, where I live, that's where I live, I like it here. Innovation over regulation. So in stark contrast to the European Union, The United Kingdom has opted for a distinctly pro-innovation, light-touch stance, actively avoiding the implementation of rigid, overarching AI legislation out of a fear that it might stifle domestic economic growth. So, which shouldn't actually be a bad thing if you fucking read some books about fractional reserve banking and fiat currency. 3% economic growth is just we've only got so many resources and all our money is debt based. So fuck economic growth as a metric for success. But it's saying here it will do that. During 2025, an eagerly anticipated UK AI bill completely failed to materialise, having been quietly shelved by policymakers. The government has instead prioritised the establishment of AI growth zones and regulatory sandboxes, relying on existing regulators such as Competition and Markets Authority and, of course, the Financial Conduct Authority, FCA. And the Information Commissioner's Office to awkwardly apply legacy rules to entirely novel AI challenges. So the current regulatory posture in the UK dictates that a dedicated AI bill will likely not appear until the second half of this year at the absolute earliest, and even then it's expected to only target the most powerful foundational models, so leaving workplace applications largely untouched. The government's Regulatory Information Office, RIO, never heard of that before, so delicious soft drink as far as I'm concerned, and like an NHS database or something, a bit weird, but it was established in late 2024, and this RIO, Regulatory Innovation Office, focuses heavily on prioritising sectors like healthcare, drones and space exploration to maximise economic output, rather than universally sort of capping AI capabilities or protecting workers from algorithmic overreach. While there are specific reactive initiatives to ban the creation of deep fakes and illegal content enforced through hefty fines and the Online Safety Act, as controversial as that piece of legislation is, do Google it. The broader overarching economic deployment of AI remains largely unfettered. This regulatory hesitancy and the deliberate legislative gridlock leaves workers profoundly vulnerable to the extortion outlined in scenario B. Without binding statutory legislation requiring effective risk mitigation for the algorithmic management or productivity tracking, companies operate within a massive legal vacuum. So, as highlighted in the parliamentary evidence submitted to the UK government regarding human rights, relying on the voluntary safety commitments of private tech companies is catastrophically insufficient. Sorry, another guy came to my door then to check that I'm alive and well in this fine establishment. Where were we? Inefficient. Yeah, catastrophically inefficient. So, as long as commitments remain voluntary, corporations are well within their rights to weaken their risk mitigation strategies whenever they conflict with profit motives. So, a phenomenon already observed in the scaling back of safety teams at major AI labs. So, you've got the labour movement resistance, fight for autonomy, maybe even not autocracy, I might use as a better word. It probably is the wrong word, but in the glaring absence of robust government intervention and protective legislation, the responsibility of establishing guardrails against technological unemployment and algorithmic extortion has increasingly fallen to organised labour. Trade unions across various sectors are recognising that AI is no longer a peripheral issue, but the central battleground for the future of work. So unions are increasingly asserting that the introduction of AI tools affecting workload, performance evaluation, surveillance or job security constitutes a mandatory subject of collective bargaining. So in recent years, we've seen historic, unprecedented labour actions directly confronting the AI threat, shifting the focus of strikes from mere wage disputes to the fundamental protection of human autonomy. The entertainment industry, both the Writers Guild of America and the Screen Actors Guild, staged massive prolonged strikes that successfully culminated in contracts mandating semi-annual meetings to discuss generative AI usage, requiring explicit financial consent for the use of digital replicas and establishing strict safeguards against the use of AI to reduce the headcount of human writers. Now, I don't know where I stand on that. Like, if they make a good film, if it's like, you know, the script's AI'd and then like so's all the CGI or whatever. Like, if it's good, it's good. I mean, you just go and get a Mackie D's and a slushy and you sit in the cinema and you fucking watch it. I mean, if it's a good film, who cares if it's made by a computer or not? I mean, I'd like to do some. I did acting at college. Like, I can't act, as you can tell, but like, you know, I sort of can, in a way. You know, quite confident, I suppose, when I'm not like morbidly depressed and suicidally self-deprecating, crying on my own. Like I was this afternoon. You know, the entertainment industry doesn't like it, so fair enough to them. They don't want to be out of the fucking job, and I think, you know, we don't need to start recording like new Leonardo DiCaprio movies on fucking Betamax, but I don't really want, like, you know, ChatGPT to be kind of, you know, creating movies with fucking deep fakes of actors. You know, the hospitality sector. The Las Vegas culinary workers secured groundbreaking collective bargaining agreements requiring major casinos to provide the union with advance notice of any AI implementation, alongside guaranteed severance packages, continued benefits, and recall rights for any workers displaced by automation. Logistics and supply chain. So, taking a highly aggressive stance, the International Longshoremen Association, ILA, launched strike actions to shut down major US ports in late 2024. They ultimately secured an agreement in the early 2025 that explicitly and unequivocally prohibits the introduction of fully automated technology, specific equipment that operates without any human interaction at the ports. These actions demonstrate that the workforce acutely recognises the dual threats of both unemployment and extortion. Unions are fighting not just to preserve headcount on a spreadsheet, but to prevent surreptitious integration of algorithms and, you know, things that hyper-monitor, endlessly critique, and systematically exploit human effort. So here's a synthesis of that. So, a convergent dystopia. Upon synthesizing the macroeconomic modelling, the empirical evidence of corporate behaviour, the deliberate legislative delays, and the inherent unyielding nature of modern capitalism, one must conclude on the most likely trajectory for the global workforce. So the reality of the next decade will not be a neat binary choice between absolute mass technology unemployment, scenario A, and universal productivity extortion, scenario B. Instead, the most probable future is a bifurcated convergence of both dystopias. They don't sound really happy to me. With the dominant defining experience for the vast majority of the population leaning heavily towards scenario B, so to systematic extortion of the augmented worker. So, you know, we ain't going to lose our jobs. Not that I've had one in fucking years, but, you know, it's probably going to be like, you'll have your job, you just have to be cracking the whip. Probably a robot behind you cracking you a whip with some giant anal beads and, like, you know, some like modafinil tablets or something. The mechanics of the bifurcation. So first, it's an undeniable that mass displacement of workers in scenario A will occur, right? That is like, it's going to happen to some extent, but it will be highly targeted rather than universal, as evidenced by Amazon's sweeping reduction of 30,000 corporate roles, mid-level administrative human resources, basic coding and entry-level analytical positions are highly susceptible to immediate eradication. Corporations will eagerly trim the fat, optimizing their overhead by replacing easily automatable cognitive tasks with generative AI models that cost fractions of a cent per operation. However, a capitalist society cannot function with an unemployment rate of 40 or 50%. The global economy inherently requires a massive base of consumers with disposable purchasing power, maybe universal basic income might be good, to buy the very goods and services that AI is optimizing. Therefore, while millions of specific roles will be automated out of existence, a vast redefined workforce must and will remain. For those who retain their employment, all those who transition into new roles, managing, prompting and overseeing these AI systems, the daily reality will be defined by severe workload intensification as well as algorithmic extortion. The triumph of scenario B. So the fundamental engine of modern corporate administration is necessitated by an absolute obsession with exponential growth, relentless productivity and maximise profit returns for shareholders. Within this specific ecosystem and our actual fucking ecosystem, artificial intelligence is not viewed as a tool for human liberation. It's merely the ultimate instrument of capital extraction. So yeah, it just cut down the fucking rainforest, mine the fuck out of all the rare minerals, and then, you know, just have a fucking mental breakdown when they all run out. That you know, that's what's going to happen in it. Overfishing the oceans, like cutting down the rainforest, like acidifying the oceans by killing the algae blooms, like the biggest CO2 respirator. Fuck blah. Anyway, enough of that. Look, I'm mental. Just listen to my voice reading this. When an AI tool allows a legal assistant, a software developer, or a supply chain manager to achieve what was historically a full day's worth of tasks in a mere 2 hours, the corporate entity will absolutely not reward that employee with 6 hours of paid leisure. Capitalism abhors a vacuum of productivity. Instead, the expectation will instantaneously and permanently shift. The new baseline target for that employee will become 4 days worth of output compressed into a single exhausting 8-hour shift. So the findings from the Harvard Business Review perfectly underscore this exact psychological and structural trap. AI transforms the act of doing more into an implicit expectation, leading to hidden massive workload increases and eventual inevitable burnout. Workers will be expected to be infinitely adaptable, continuously managing multiple AI data streams, constantly correlating machine hallucinations and maintaining a blistering, unnatural pace dictated by the processing speed of silicon rather than the biological and cognitive limits of our own fucking brains. Furthermore, because algorithmic management tools will be deployed to surveil this output, employees will completely lose the autonomy to pace their own work. So the machine will dictate the schedule, track the keystrokes, and evaluate the performance with cold mathematical precision. The worker is thus reduced to an organic cog attempting to keep pace with an inorganic motor. What a terrible metaphor. There's a good reason why AI. There was this thing right the other day, it's like, give AI the finger, a poster, and it had like a picture of someone sticking like 2 middle fingers out of that. You know, it's just the sort of thing that floats someone. Sometimes, like, it's not a bad metaphor, it's better than some of mine. It is better than some of mine, but they will be extorted for every conceivable ounce of productivity, pressured by the looming implicit threat. If they fail to meet these new superhuman targets, they will easily be relegated to the growing pool of technologically unemployed. In conclusion, the end bit, the best bit after almost an hour of watching me. Thank you for staying with me, and don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, and, you know, tell all your mates you've seen this really interesting video. Conclusion, the preservation of human dignity. So the ubiquitous integration of artificial intelligence into the global economy represents a societal paradigm shift comparable only to the Industrial Revolution, yet it is progressing velocity that entirely defies historical precedent. As we navigate the oncoming decades, the juxtaposed fears of mass economic irrelevance and relentless workload extortion are both highly valid. So that's really depressing, isn't it? Yet it is the latter, the extortion of the augmented worker, that will ultimately define daily lived experience of the modern workforce. If you're lucky enough to still have a fucking job, you'll probably be working too hard and too fast. Artificial intelligence will undoubtedly make discrete tasks easier to execute, but it will make the totality of the job itself exponentially harder by raising the absolute ceiling of what is computationally possible within a given time frame. So AI simultaneously raises the floor of what's demanded by employers. The extortion of workers in industries where AI accelerates productivity is not an accidental glitch in the system. It is the intended, designed feature of a market structure entirely beholden to persist to the preservative necessity of exponential growth and what the fuck? Did I say Margate? I used to get my teeth done in Margate. I mean, I think, or I think it was somewhere in Reading, in Margate, fuck knows. Margin expansion is what I should have said. This grim reality brings us back to the stark, surreptitious warnings of Geoffrey Hinton when the godfather of AI speaks of intrinsic existential risks and grave threats to our liberty and security. He's not merely referring to science fiction scenarios of rogue military networks launching nuclear weapons. The true loss of liberty begins much closer to home. It begins in the workplace when a human worker is subjected to an algorithm that strips them of their autonomy, dictates their cognitive pace, surveils their every digital movement, and holds their economic survival hostage to the impossible superhuman production targets. Their fundamental security and liberty have already been profoundly compromised. Just to finish up, 55 minutes, epic. If humanity allows artificial intelligence to progress exponentially without enacting radical, legally binding frameworks that explicitly prioritise human well-being, dignity and autonomy over corporate efficiency, we will surrender control of our society. We will not necessarily be wiped out by malevolent code in a fiery apocalypse, but we will be entirely quietly subjugated to the unyielding, profit-driven algorithms we created to serve us. Or do they serve themselves? Weird. Maybe they do. To prevent the complete exhaustion of the human spirit in the face of a limitless computational power, society must urgently redefine the value of labour, strictly regulate algorithmic management, and recognise that technological advancement without rigid humanistic boundaries is indistinguishable from tyranny. Well, that was that was quite a lot of bollocks, wasn't it, for an hour? I really appreciate you taking the time to watch my video, and everybody who has been in touch and said hello, even if only very briefly. Big up to all you people, and I hope that everybody is healthy and happy. I look bloody awful at the moment, on lots of different meds, and I'm really overweight and unhealthy. I'm really depressed and really tired of this whole thing of being in hospital. Fucking sucks. Hopefully I'll get out soon, and then I won't have a life, and I'll probably just die miserable and alone, face down in pool of my own filth. But if I don't, let's go for coffee. We can discuss social commentary, and I'll imbue my unique ambivalent arrogance to you to the extent you'll probably leave the room and delete my number and block me on social media. Even so, you might all hate me, but I still love you. So with that being said, I'll call it a night. Cheers.